This is the London Fintech Podcast, brought to you by your host, Mike Ballerman, bridging the worlds of suits and t-shirts, of finance and technology, bringing you insights, stories, and inspiration from the golden age of opportunity and innovation happening in London right now.
Hi, this is Mike Ballerman, and this is London Fintech Podcast, episode 144, brought to you in association with Smart Pension. And I'm delighted to be joined today by Sam O'Connor, founder of Coconut, to discuss how financial technologies can act as glue to create new propositions. Coconut are a great example of this, as their proposition for owner-managed businesses and self-employed people combines current account, accounting and tax in one place. Having been an indie myself for 20 years, I know what a completely over-the-top pain it is having to do all the things that a company does just to handle a few invoices a year. So this is clearly something in need of solution. But that's just one example. For all the non-stop noise out there about technologies per se, which we all hear all the time, and some of which we discussed on the show, such as open banking, it's just some glue, or smart pipes if you like, AI, ML, what you use your computer for these days, and big data, hey, we haven't heard of that before, have we? These are just new forms of, mixing my metaphors, it's Friday afternoon here, we got up early for reasons we'll come on to, new forms of Lego blocks, new Meccano pieces to enable entrepreneurs to build things their predecessors could not. It seems to me that we're just at the start of these possibilities. We've heard so much about these glue technologies as technologies themselves, but so far people haven't really used them to stick things together in a completely different way and solve problems that, in this case, for example, an independent like myself for 20 years always had, but never actually thought was a thing to which there might be a solution. Possibilities occur when people use technologies and create new propositions and new, more complex products for the marketplace. Plenty to talk about, so let's get on with the show. Hi Sam, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks very much, Mike. Excited to be here.
And you were saying that you were sort of going down with a lurgy, but you've just drank 3 bottles of night nurse or something like that, so you're sounding quite awake.
Yeah, I've dosed up some ibuprofen and some Covonia.
Oh, I see. Maybe I should have had some as well, because in terms of everyone being sleepy today is we're recording this the Friday before the podcast goes out. Today is the day where Boris I was crowned King Emperor of the UK, so everything has changed overnight. I despise the BBC these days. I quite happily shut them down. Actually, do you know, here's a question, that the majority of criminal prosecutions against women in this country are from the BBC for non-payments of licence fee?
Oh, really?
Yeah, great woke virtue signalers that they are. And there was a bill through Parliament last year, I think, which one of the many things that didn't happen in Parliament, just to make that a civil offence or a tort or whatever it's called, where you just get fined. And the BBC managed to put the kibosh on that one. But yes, it was the usual BBC crap in terms of, if you add up all the numbers of parties that weren't completely for Brexit, well, once again, remain one. Give me a break. And for those people who are a long way abroad and not up to sort of UK politics, up to our eyeballs, as we have been in the UK for some time, the Labour Party did the worst they have since about 1935, depending on how you calculate it. And I think sort of Boris did the best share of the vote for Conservatives since 1970, so it's a kind of a record victory. But even so, the BBC spin it the other way. Anyway, were you getting the champagne out last night, this morning, or were you sort of crying into your cocoa?
I saw the exit polls come out, and with 2 young kids, I try and get an early night. So went to bed, woke up in the morning, and it was a clear and decisive outcome. So we'll see how that pans out. I think it'll be good to see how Brexit pans out for the business community. And I think, in one respect, regardless of your views on the topic, it's probably good that it was a clear and decisive outcome.
Yes, I think that's right. On the way here, I bought my Darjeeling, which I always buy from an Indian man at Borough Market. It's fantastic, first flush Darjeeling, and he knows me very well. And he was asking me what he thought, what I thought of the politics and what it all meant, and all this kind of stuff. And we were talking about this before. And as you say, regardless of where you're coming from by now, there's ennui around the place. And simply from a business perspective, you need certainty going forward. So we've had 3.5 years of stasis, complete chaos. Politicians acting extremely badly, anarchy, the so-called Supreme Court, which is a disaster in itself, which the current government may have to revisit, involving itself in politics for the first time in about 300 odd years. since we had a civil war. So it was all very anarchic and it was all gridlocked. So it's actually quite nice to be going somewhere. Although the irony is that after, I think this is where the sort of Germans start laughing at us, the irony is that after 3.5 years of so-called Brexiting, and for all this pushed up media hysteria around deal and no deal, we didn't actually have a deal. We don't know anything. We will have formally left the EU, as I understand it, by the end of January. But then everything stays exactly the same for a year. Well, they actually start negotiating after almost 4 years on what it's going to look like afterwards. So this Indian chap was saying, well, will I need a visa to go to Europe? I said, well, I don't know. I mean, we're going skiing next year. We won't need a visa in 2020, but will we need a visa in 2021 to go skiing in France, for example, or vice versa? None of these things have been known. So, yes, we all say it's good to be going somewhere where we know, but we don't.
Actually, I was lucky enough to go on the Ian King show on Sky to talk about some Brexit-related stuff for self-employed.
Oh, you see, I didn't know you're a political correspondent.
Yes, it was a great series of Instagram photos. But one of the major things was how the uncertainty was impacting our customer segment, and I think often coconut's really for owner-managed businesses and individuals running businesses. We broadly call them self-employed people, and I think sometimes
people like me, basically,
people like you, but also people who do photography for weddings or run flower shops or sell goods in Europe. And I think that element of the business community is often forgotten by the government, and they didn't have much support in preparing for it. And so one indicator of how important that international trade is for people is that one of the most requested features on our platform is international payments and how people can manage those. And so actually Europe is impactful for the self-employed community, and so the uncertainty has definitely been a burden.
Absolutely, and again, the media have portrayed Boris as an extremist or as thick. I mean, he's not thick. He's a Greek at Eton and Oxford, and he's not extreme. I mean, his spending plans put him sort of left end of the sort of Tory spectrum of the governments in the last 9 years. But I was quite impressed by his talk after they won the referendum, and he looked a bit surprised that they won, and he was talking about the fact that we remain Europeans. We are Europeans. We're semi-detached because of the channel, but that was a geological issue rather than anything else. It turned into a cultural one. And it's good to have somebody who is going to, we hope, set about creating a positive vision of the future, as opposed to what the previous government was doing, which is just trying to sort of manage a little sort of input as vision as possible where we were. So, I mean, the one thing I particularly liked, he said some time ago, was this idea about creating free ports in the UK. Something innovative like that. So, Grimsby has gone Conservative for the first time ever or something like that. Well, let's make Grimsby a free port by way of thanks. But there's all sorts of opportunities to do things different. And equally, going back to whenever it was 3 years ago when Giles Andrews, chairman of Open Hour, was on the show talking about the impact of Brexit, the other thing that we pointed out was that regardless of so-called independence, taking back control, there's going to have to be a hell of a lot of paralleling of standards and regulations and all this kind of stuff. I mean, the EU is well into extraterritoriality with things like GDPR. Even American companies have to stand and salute to that one. So it's a bit like being next to a black hole. You can, mixing my metaphors, you can untangle yourself, but you're still in the gravitational well. I mean, and it's a good example, payments and all these kind of things. We'll have to abide by their directives if you're trying to pay somebody in France.
Well, I think one of the big financial services impacts of Europe, which isn't going to change regardless of Brexit, was PSD2. And so what the UK did, which I thought was actually really pioneering, was say we're going to go ahead of Europe when it comes to sharing banking data with open banking and the CMA's ruling around competition in banking. And it's UK is a really interesting testbed actually, because if you look in Germany, there are many thousands of banks, whereas in the UK, 90% of current accounts are really with the top 9 banks. And so as a starting point for pioneering those standardised APIs for open banking data, it's a really great market for it. I think what that shows is that as a country and as a government, we're open to actually pioneering new things ahead of the game, and so hopefully that won't stop them.
Well, we absolutely have to do that. And when you were talking, I was thinking that in terms of this sort of painful topic, I mean, I don't know about you, but by and large, I avoid it like the plague when speaking to any people in London. I mean, there were some I haven't been keeping up with for a couple of years because they've sort of just gone so crazy about the topic, but one really doesn't mention it. My takeaway on this is that in terms of where we could be in 3, 4, 5 years' time, we could be a hell of a lot better. We could have done innovative things and cut back the over-regulation and all that kind of stuff. Or we could be a lot worse. There's room for improvement and there's room for cock-up. And, in a sense, amongst the people I know, the ones who... a number of them who voted for Remain and very ardent Remainers are basically fearful. They think, oh God, we're bound to cock it up kind of stuff. Whereas the ones who are more optimistic, and I think I'm in the optimistic camp, perhaps have a more historical understanding, which is that the one thing that Britain has historically done well is to muddle through. And at the last stage of the book, I just squeezed a paragraph in about the relative East India companies in Europe in the 17th, 18th centuries, and it's amazing how long-lasting these patterns are. I mean, the whole mentality in Europe for centuries has been state centralist. So over here, a group of merchants petitioned Elizabeth I for a year, and she was shit scared of the sort of Spanish and the Portuguese who were sort of just stuffing us up, and we were nobody in late 16th century. And then a group of merchants said, we can do this. They said, oh, okay, you can do it. They went off and did it. The French East India Company, in contrast, Louis XIV wrote to a bunch of cities and a bunch of merchants and said, you will fund this. And most of them shrugged and said no, and he ended up funding it mostly himself, And this kind of state centralism is a very, very long-running thing. We went on obviously Spain was fascist for quite a long time. Everyone talks about sort of Germany all the time and Italy, but Spain and Portugal were fascist for much, much longer. We went on a food tour in Porto, and I was very shocked by the person who took us around, a very good food tour. And they said that when they were little, their mum, they had the 2 kids, you could only go out with, I think it was 3 people at a time into the Portuguese fascist dictator. And so you have to leave one of the kids at home. I mean, it's like, this is in our life. Well, not in your lifetime. So yes, the French have been state centralists for a long time. The Spanish and the Portuguese, the Germans, the Italians, the Holy Roman Empire. So a lot of it has been state centralist, and a lot of it has been very top-down, which has caused a lot of the misunderstandings, I think, and a lot of the problems. And by top-down, I mean Americans are also top-down, is that you have a sort of a Bill of Rights or something. Like America's got an example. Here's the Constitution. You're guaranteed this, 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 and this, and this. So the purpose of the Supreme Court is when these dumb politicians come up with some law, they say, oh, that's compatible, it's all right, tick, or no, you can't do that. So that's what I mean by state centralist and top-down. Britain, we've just sort of muddled along and made it up with bits of common law as we go along, and hence the problem with the Supreme Court. It doesn't work. So we've got this top-down European approach, this state centralist approach, this very bureaucratic approach, this very technocratic approach. The EU has put a prime minister into Italy, which is you leave it to the sort of the clever people to work it out, because you don't want people like Louis XIV, because look what goes wrong. Anyway, so just 2 different ways of doing it, whether you think of them right or wrong. Anyway, let's move on from that. We're all interested to see how it goes over the next few years. I'm pleased that we have a government that actually can get on with governing and leading. If they do a great job, we'll vote for them, and if they don't, we'll kick them out next time. Sue, career journey. You had a career, and then you did coconuts.
I had a career, yeah, I did.
You may still have a career, hopefully an even greater career.
I guess entrepreneurship for me started when I was around 16, and I actually left school and started a few different businesses, from an environmentally friendly cleaning company to a club night. And then everyone, after doing my A-levels a little bit later than most, at 19, and then going to uni, everyone was pretty surprised when I joined PwC to become an auditor, but seemed like a good route, which has turned out to be incredibly fruitful as a foundation for a career. And this is now my second accounting related business.
And the first one?
The first one was called ProConfirm, and as a junior auditor, one of the first jobs you do is send letters to banks to verify their audit sort of related balances, cash, any trades and those kind of things. And the letters go out and invariably don't come back. And so we set about building a platform to manage that process a bit better. And actually, we were acquired by an American company called Capital Confirmation in 2014 and spent some time with them actually deploying their software into 50 banks in the UK, into all the major audit firms. And that was a really interesting experience for us. And after we left Capital Confirmation, after a couple of years, we joined the self-employed community. And so we had a fairly unique understanding of banking, accounting and fintech, and wanted to really do something to address this like shifting workforce towards self-employment and entrepreneurship, and build something that helped them to manage their business more effectively by taking a lot of the admin out.
Yes, it's interesting that you've experienced the pain from your self-perspective and therefore understood it. And on last time's podcast with Michael Pearson, who looked at the data on 10 years profitability and capital raises, but we mostly spoke about profitability over the last decade, the one thing that leapt out was that disruptive businesses who are breaking the mold, all this kind of stuff, like Funding Circle, are having huge problems, whereas unsexy ones, if I may call that auditing unsexy just for the sake of argument, unsexy ones actually do quite well. You know, there's a genuine issue there, and people can't really be bothered, and you know, you're not going to get this hysteria of everyone flooding. Blockchain's another good example. You know, so there's so much hype over that, it's got sucked in, but it's not clear what the actual problem was in the first place that it was solving, rather than, oh yes, this was used for Bitcoin, I'm sure it can be used for something else. Whereas, as I say, I've experienced the pain in the arse myself over 20 years of having invoices and money coming in here, money going out there, keeping track of the bank stuff, trying to pay myself, getting it accounted. Oh, what was the tax again? Oh my God, I've got to pay the tax. And going back into European stuff, the greatest challenge for me was not so much international payments, that always got done somehow. Those IBANs or numbers I can never quite remember. But the biggest challenge, actually, I don't know whether you picked this one up, is VAT, which is always a huge pain in the arse. I think I did a speaking gig a couple of Christmases ago in Latvia. Do I have to charge them VAT? Oh, I don't know. So, you know, email to the accountant and 15 emails later. So coming back to whether we're in the EU or not, we were in the EU. It was still a frictional item because of the lack of harmonisation of taxes. For indies, or very small numbers of people, as you know yourself, it can be hugely inefficient structure to have to wrap yourself in, really. I mean, you know, it's only kind of convention that I'm wrapped in a company and everyone else is wrapped in a company. It'd be much easier if I wasn't. So something that can make that better, I know myself, and there are millions of people these days doing stuff like what I'm doing.
Yeah, I mean, accounting isn't that sexy, it's true, but massive market. If you look at Sage, Intuit, they're, you know, in the sort of 100 billion mark in terms of market cap, Xero in the sort of 7 billion mark. And what those products do is they solve the need or the requirement that the authorities place on us to do administration. And VAT's a really good example of that, because making tax digital, which came into force for VAT last year, means that anyone who's VAT registered has to submit their VAT return through a digital platform every quarter.
Unless, like me this year, you're very sensible and you make no money whatsoever other than sort of pence from sponsorship because you're busy writing a book. So actually, I go under the limit. But that was another example, I thought, of the state just pushing corporatism, because making tax digital, I just thought was a euphemism for you've got to buy some bloody software for one of these sort of corporate sellers. I mean, I've used a spreadsheet for 20 years and, you know, I never send out that many invoices that I can't keep track of it. So, yes, I found that complete pain in the arse, actually.
So you talked a bit about indies or self-employed people, and actually that's really where the bulk of the growth has been in the SME market since 2000. So 90% of new SMEs since 2000 are non-employing businesses. And out of the 5.7 million SMEs in the UK, 5 million of those are owner-managed businesses, which is the group that we are interested in.
So there is a market which is millions in this country alone for you.
Yeah, and 100 million plus in our immediate kind of neighbouring economies, whether that's Europe or the US.
So let's return to the example at the end of the main course in terms of the accounting and that. In terms of the bigger picture point here, which I thought it was worth highlighting because there's always waves and waves coming through, which is this idea that all of these things, I could have included APIs as well, APIs, open banking, are just a kind of connectors, they're bridges across silos, the way of sticking things together that have never been stuck together before. And we've seen a little bit of that with app banks, notably Revolut's a great example. You could open your Revolut app and do all sorts of stuff in there. But how do you see this going as somebody who is trying to glue together different silos?
So Coconut, yeah, you're right. It glues together a few different concepts. So bookkeeping is one, getting paid is another, which is a big one, sending out invoices and keeping on top of them, and then managing your tax or VAT. And what enables us to do that in a really good way is smartphones. And if you go back in time in terms of platform changes, you had originally accounting packages by Sage, you'd have it on your desktop and you'd receive a CD-ROM every year that would update your tax. And then the internet came about and Xero moved that into the cloud, but actually that was pre-smartphone, and really they had a lot of challenges in terms of just the infrastructure and getting people used to the fact that they didn't have it on their desktop. And so for us coming in now, we are not only tapping into the platform shift of smartphones, but also the market shift of this boom in individuals running businesses who are very, very time poor. And so it's really that technology that's enabled us to deliver a really nice experience to those customers and save them a lot of time. And I think the other important aspect the other important trend that we are leveraging is the fact that everyone from banks through open banking to platforms that enable these customers to find work, like Amazon or Uber, are opening up their data so that we can make much more sense or triangulate the bookkeeping treatment of different transactions much more effectively.
And it's, I was about to say obvious case, but that's to underestimate the skill of the entrepreneur in spotting it, because it's been, quotes, an obvious case for 20 years, but no one kind of spotted it over that period. But going back to the broader case in fintech or in financial services as a whole, do you see this as being a new wave, as gluing together things that people had previously got used to thinking of separately? I mean, I got used to having a bank account and pieces of paper would come in and an account and a spreadsheet of, I just spent 10 pence on a new pencil sharpener or something like that. And then I'd separately I'd email it all to an accountant. And they were three different things. I never conceived them as being one thing. So do you think there's a lot of opportunity out there across FS as a whole for doing more of that?
Yeah, and there are much more creative tools coming out. Okay, so I guess a kind of comparable example is back in the day I used to have like an MP3 player, a camera. I used to do my emails on my desktop, and then I'd have a Nokia 3310 or whatever. And those have all come together into one place. And the reason for that is it makes sense from a technology perspective, but actually the benefits of having all of those in one place were probably unexpected. So the fact that you can talk into your phone and send a photo quickly on an email or a file on an email, you might not have conceived of that as a benefit or upload it onto social media when someone conceived of the idea of bringing everything together. Yeah,
the camera was something you took photos on, of course, that was it. What else are you going to do with them? They're photos.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then, as you say, the emails, that was email.
Yeah. And so bringing all those things together created unexpected benefits and unexpected industries. And we're seeing the same thing by bringing all of the tools that you need in one place, particularly combining the payments data with all of these upstream kind of concepts like getting paid on time. And a typical example of this is addressing one of the problem themes that we're really interested in around late payments. So self-employed people have zero power to exert on companies to get them to pay faster. And actually, payment times are getting longer. And so the problem of late payments is really acute for an individual because cash flow is often lumpy, and if a payment doesn't come in, you might be stuck for your rent or whatever. And so by combining an invoicing tool with the payments coming through so that you can match up invoices with payments, you can define terms around payment terms and define what treatment you have in there, you can actually layer in, it becomes a platform for products like invoice insurance that will enable people to get paid reliably, get paid faster, and all within the same experience. And what we see is our product and our bookkeeping automation platform becoming the platform that all of these additional products and very innovative fintech products sit on to solve problems for our customers.
Yes, I think there's a certain amount of product push and demand pull here in terms of integrating various different things in one place. So I'm convinced for personal reasons that you're solving a genuine problem, and that, you've got the usual business things of cost of customer acquisition. If you go around knocking on everybody's doors in London one by one saying, hello, are you an owner manager or whatever, do you have this problem? It may take you some time and it may cost quite a lot of money. So that's just quotes, just a business. But there's a genuine problem to be solved there. On the other hand, with banks, not that the industry as a whole has been particularly fast at going forwards, it's not yet clear to me, shall we say, that I want to buy 100 financial services through my Revolut app. They don't do 100, but metaphorically speaking. Or in Monzo's case, wasn't the first one notoriously they added a deposit out of which they took 0.5% or something, so you got 0.75% via your Monzo app, and you can get 1.25% by going to their partner. So I think in many cases where people are gluing things together, it's kind of, hey, look, you can do all of this. And you go, oh, right, okay. and you go on with your life, because it's not solving a problem that you have,
I think you covered a few really interesting topics there, and I think actually they're all related. One of the big product features that we launched actually last week was that we are now aggregating data through open banking from providers of 20 different banks. 20 different banks and credit cards. So you can bring all of your data in. You can use Coconut's bookkeeping features regardless of who you bank with. And I think that touches on the customer acquisition, or how do you find these customers? Because what we're doing now is we're having conversations with partners who have these customers already and who want to provide the functionality that we've built to their customers, and actually that's enabling us to access a different, we don't have to go around knocking on people's houses, we just go to the places where those customers exist already and provide a really nice service.
Are you saying something then in terms of like a reconceptualization, that going back to historically I received bank accounts through the post every month. It was a piece of paper with the transactions on and numbers on the right. But in terms of reconceptualizing that, there's no reason why, are you saying, that, for example, HSBC, who know my company, and I've ticked a company box, and they send me, rather than just a boring bunch of transactions, classic style, they send me the same shit in accounting style.
Yeah. So they could point you in our direction and say, and this comes back to your revenue point, they could point us in our direction and say, hey, hook up your HSBC account to Coconut, you'll get a deal. And you don't necessarily, because if you trust them for your banking products, like loans and things like that, you can still get access to those products to help you run your business, because working capital management's a big thing for businesses. There's not enough loans going to businesses like yours and things like that. And ultimately, we work in tandem to provide to solve all of your bookkeeping needs, but you've got the choice about where you bank and who you take loans from and things like that. And then we also have the added advantage of, because of the richness of the data, you're saying, maybe I don't want to go to this company for this product or this product. Actually, we can start to provide you the best products for you, so that they're much more tailored to what you want based on the data that we have, and so provide a much richer experience.
Yes, and so we're playing around here with between the boundary of data, which is just pieces of stuff, and information. So if I spent 10 pence today on a pencil sharpener, that's just an item. However, the information that could be derived from that is, let's just say we did this sort of real time, the information that could be derived from that is that my working capital has gone up by 10p, my cash in the bank has done this, my taxes has done that, even as a sort of rough ongoing basis. So an issue that I always find as an indie is you get to the end of the year, you send it off to the accountants, they do all sorts of clever jiggery pokey, and something comes back that you weren't quite expecting. You go, or in my case, actually, this has been traditionally the case the last few years. It's very funny, actually. You think I know something after 30 years in FS. Okay, so yes, thanks to the accountants and all that in these stupid formats they are these days. So, sorry, how much can I pay myself then? I can't actually tell, there's some director's loan account and this and that and the other. But yes, so you've got the data, which is how much you've actually spent and how much has come in. But then you've got these, at the end of the day, what does a solo care? All I care is how much I can get. I've got to pay some VAT, I've got to pay some tax, and the rest of it is how much can I have then? That's all these transactions amount to. So there's no reason, in a sense, you couldn't have a sort of a live running total at the bottom.
And that's totally what we're doing. So the thing that we identified is that as an individual running a business, even if you outsource your bookkeeping to an accountant, it's often done in a quarterly cycle or an annual cycle. And so you get to the end of the year and you've suddenly got a surprise tax bill. You don't know what, you've maybe got a fine for not filing something and things like that. And so what we're doing is we're taking that manual work away by giving a running assessment of your P&L using the data that comes in. And so actually that helps both you. It helps you if you don't have an accountant, but it also helps the accountant because they can dip in and say, oh, actually, you may be coming to a cash inflection point because you've got this VAT bill, you may need to figure out a loan, or you seem to be accumulating a massive cash balance. Why don't you think about it?
Or your bad debts are going up. It's a bit like driving a car. You've got all these sort of speedos and petrol gauges and temperature things in front of you. And that's the information.
Yeah.
The spending on a pencil sharpener is just a bit of data.
Exactly. So we want to free up you and free up accountants from actually compiling all the information so that then they can actually make sensible and informed assessments of how your business is.
Yeah, they can do the value-added thing. Well, don't pay yourself this year, Mike, because you've got quite a lot. Keep some of it for next year and pay another dividend next year, and the added value thing. Right. Okay. So let's just wrap up on the bigger picture again, then, Sam. What sort of kind of case studies do you see of this in general beyond coconut? We'll come back to coconut at the end.
It's much like you've probably got a bit of a portfolio type income, and I think there's a drive really to start taking control of people's career, of your income, and actually finding it something a bit more engaging. A really good example of this was a friend of mine emailed me the other day and said, I used to work with her at Virgin Media in finance, and she said, I'm using Coconut, I'm building a bit of a portfolio career, doing some copywriting, a bit of finance consulting, and I want to sell products online. And it really just highlighted for me why that market shift is happening. And I think it's really supported by platforms. So there are platforms like Substack, and you may be interested to read the article on the passion economy that Andreessen Horowitz published recently. On Substack, the highest earner is earning $500,000 a year, and they are monetizing their blog content. And there's other platforms like Podia, and that enables people to monetize, video courses and things like that. So the ecosystem is developing to such an extent that individuals can kind of sell their personal brand and their individuality throughout the world. And then you've got Amazon on the other side that, makes 50% of its revenue from third-party selling on its platform. And so the opportunities to be an entrepreneur, to be self-employed are growing, and that's being reflected in this changing workforce, which we find really exciting.
Absolutely. So it's a good example of where we get two things meeting, which is that changes in technology, people invent APIs, people invent open banking and all these things, and then the children get to play with them and stick them together in different ways. But also at the same time, the social structures of the world are changing, and Rosie's scenario and the two overlap. So before we wrap up the show, the last one of this year, the first under King Boris I, I'd like to thank all the listeners out there. Particularly like to thank Max Carpis, who once again has been an Uber listener, gig economy, see what I did there, by suggesting an excellent guest for me. Thank you very much, Max. I'd also like to thank my brand partners for the podcast, Smart Pension, who are fast, secure and free. Check out their UK workplace pensions at autoenrolment.co.uk. And also, actually, I should give a shout out to Smart Pension for doing just the kind of thing that you're talking about, or rather Revolut, in that Smart Pension and Revolut now have a tie-up. So if you're a business customer of Revolut, presumably you press a button and you've suddenly got an auto-enrolment thing, et voila, for your business, which is a very good example, as you say, of pulling things together. I mean, normally you think, I've got my bank account and, I need an auto-enrolment thing because the government says I have to. And they would appear to be two different tasks for two different people. But now it's going back to your smartphones. It's in the same smartphone, and you've just pressed a button. So it's a very good example of your thesis.
We're Smart Pension customers at Coconut, and we love what they do. So it's a great product.
Maybe you'll get together and you could do Smart Coconuts.
There's a few good combos of names that we've dreamt up.
But you're actually, joking apart, you're getcoconut.com, aren't you?
Yes, that's right.
Sorry, and why is it coconut? I know everyone has to go for a silly name because A, it's memorable, and B, all the sensible names like Harrods and Selfridges went a long time ago, but where did coconut come from? Or were you on Company's House for 5 days and you suddenly said, get coconut? Yeah, that hasn't been taken.
Yeah, coconut really it's a reference to the fact that self-employed people, when they start out, they aspire to work from a beach somewhere. And we realised that actually with the admin that comes with it, they don't really get to do that. So the goal is to take them back there.
I see. Well, when I'm on a beach with coconuts, I'm always extremely careful because one of those buggers lands on your head, it'll sort of bash your brains in.
It does kill a few people a year, doesn't it?
Yes, they're very, very big. Yeah. I mean, because the coconuts we see are all wrapped up in all this other stuff as well, actually.
We won't bash you on the head.
Good. Excellent. Well, would you like to wave your flags and throw your breadcrumbs upon the water in this new Reich?
Yeah, so we're on a mission to automate bookkeeping admin for self-employed people, whether you're a sole trader or a small limited company. And we want you to be able to build a life-changing business by automating your bookkeeping. So come to getcoconut.com or tell your friends about it. And the other, I guess, interesting thing on the horizon is that last year we had an incredibly successful crowdfund on the platform called Crowdcube. We had 2,000 investors and we raised £2 million. And because of that, we're going to do another crowdfund bang in the middle of tax season in Q1 next year. So if you want to hear a bit more about that, come to getcoconut.com/invest.
And how many of you coconuts are there now?
There's 20 in our team, and in terms of the size of our business, we're 16,500 customers with 650 accountants using the product.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I like the journey and I wish you every success in the future, and in the new year I should definitely check you out when I've done all my 2019 things, which at this rate will take me a little bit into 2020. So I wish you every success in the future. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and to the listeners as well.
Thanks for having me, and good luck with your book.
Thanks for listening. If you have consulting, advisory/non-exec or media needs in the FS or fintech space, get in touch with me at mike@londonfintechpodcast.com.
We could sit in a bender all day, watching the firelight dance, watching the firelight dance. We could walk in the mountains before dawn, watching a happy moon ride, watching a happy moon ride. To come away from the city, with the tarmac so dead and the people so sad. Come away from the city, with the faces so grey, with the pain of the everyday. We are wild like the mountains and the trees. Can you see what I mean? Can you see what I mean? We fit in between the earth and the sky. Kiss the city goodbye, wave the city goodbye, wave the city goodbye, the city goodbye. Watch the firelight dance with me, 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 watch the firelight dance.